Hello and welcome to this week's Ask Coach Cam, where I answer your burning fat loss questions. Earlier in the week, I asked people for their questions, and this week's set is what we have. If you want to ask questions, you can while I'm streaming, and I'll try and get to them at the end. If not, I'll be sure to include them next week. So, first question up this week. We've got from Paula. Hi, Mum. And Paula says, I've been cutting calories for a while and I've stopped losing weight. Is my metabolism broken? Should I go into a bigger deficit? Quite a common question. Right off the bat, no, you shouldn't. And that's making a few assumptions that you're measuring, and it was all working before, etc., etc. But no, you shouldn't go deeper into a caloric deficit, especially if you're operating around that. My personal max recommended deficit of around 500 kilocalories. Anything beyond that, we're starting to talk. It starts to go into, maybe 600 kilocalories wouldn't be extreme, but we start to go into extreme dieting or crash dieting, all those kind of things. That's the sort of line I've drawn where we go from sustainable dieting into crash dieting. And the reason that you shouldn't go deeper into caloric deficit is a few reasons. I think chiefly the biggest reason is the starvation response. So as well, it's worth stating a starvation response is different from the hunger response, okay? We starve over a long period of time, so we're thinking weeks, months, okay, when we're talking about the starvation response. That's the kind of timescales we're talking. Hunger response, we're talking minutes, hours, okay? We might feel hungry for a couple of hours. The hunger response and starvation response, different things. Starvation is much longer, okay? And what the starvation response is it's basically your body resisting fat loss, and this is useful for Paleolithic man, okay? If your fat storages are going down, okay, what your body interprets that as okay, we're not eating enough food, time to panic, okay? So over time, what your body will do, it will slow your metabolism down, it will increase your hunger response, so you'll start to feel more hungry, and it will actually increase your fat storage when you do eat. So when you do eat, it'll increase what it's putting in fat storage so you can save it for later, because obviously your body thinks you're starving, so we want to save as much of it as possible. So it will actually increase fat storage. And the way your body does this is through the hormone leptin, okay? And as we decrease our fat stores, our leptin, which is made in fat, is obviously reduced with the size of the cells. And so as that happens, the hypothalamus, our centers in the brain, they tell our body, okay, we're getting less leptin, which means our fat storage is going down. Simply put, you're losing fat, and your body goes, okay, that means we're starving. Or another way to put it is your body simply just adapts to a lower calorie intake. So this, by slowing the metabolism down, it's basically slowing everything down. It's going, okay, we haven't got as many free calories to burn right now. We haven't, we can't be free and loose. We've got to be frugal, with the calories that we're getting. So it will slow your metabolism down. So, and we know that basal metabolic rate is actually the biggest proportion of calories we burn on a daily basis. Okay. So that's what the starvation response is doing. And essentially it's resisting fat loss. And another thing I want to show you in relation to, it relates to the starvation response, but before we start getting into solutions, it's a thing worth noting, and that is the Matador study. So if you bear with me, I'm going to make myself small, and we are going to take a look at one of my slides from the 1% course. There we go. I've gone all lil technology, eh? So you can see from here, hopefully you can see my mouse. So here we've got a graph, and it shows weight loss in two groups of people, okay? Weight loss in kilos. This first group, the group that lost less weight, they were just 16 weeks, continuous diet, okay? Continuous energy deficit. And this second group here, they were 2 weeks, basically 2 weeks on, 2 weeks in an energy deficit or a caloric deficit, followed by 2 weeks at maintenance calories. So they'd come out of that deficit and eat to maintenance, which essentially means energy equilibrium. You're eating just as much as you're using. And we can see from this graph that the group 2, the people who took diet breaks, lost the most weight, okay? And we can take this further and keep going on and on and on. They actually regained less weight after the intervention period as well. A few things like that. So this is a really illustrative study that shows how going on a diet break can help us. And chiefly, hold on, I'll make myself big again. Here we go. Big cam. Good. So we've got that Matador study, and we've got what we know about the starvation response, and it's, or rather just our body adapting to low calories, okay? And what we can see is that essentially we're going to plateau at some point when it comes to fat loss. We're going to reach a point where we stop losing as much fat because our body is adapting to our diet and all those kind of things. So what we want to do is we want to take diet breaks. Now, in that Matador study, they took 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. You can do the diet breaks kind of however you want. I know a nutritionist who will do 6 weeks on and 4 weeks at maintenance, for example, things like that. Either way, instead of reducing calories further, we actually need to make maybe a counterintuitive move and actually take our foot off the gas and go back up to maintenance so that we can re-establish what normal is. Now, if you've been in a caloric deficit for a long time, it may be that re-establishing normal even takes a little bit longer. You know, we may need 4 weeks at maintenance. We may need a bit longer. But essentially, taking diet breaks, or some people call it reverse dieting, is very important to fat loss as we sustain it over a longer period of time. Okay, so that's sort of the solution to the kind of starvation response from reaching a plateau. In relation to the starvation response as well, obviously one of the ways we can counter that is through sustainable dieting as well. So we don't go into as much a caloric deficit. We stick to that 500 kilocalorie limit that I mentioned earlier. And that's how we can limit the starvation response. Increasing activity has been shown to limit the starvation response, okay? So there are a few different ways we can limit the starvation response. Realistically, you're never going to eliminate it. Your fat stores go down, your body detects it. There's no real cheating the body with regards to that. So, yes, my recommendation, Paula, is to take that lateral move and start going on diet breaks, and maybe just start doing this 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, and you'll find you'll start losing fat again, rather than going into more of a deficit. Okay, if your body is adapted to 500 kilocalories deficit, and then we go to, let's say, 750 kilocalorie deficit, number one, our body is already, what your body is telling you by stopping losing weight is that 500 kilocalorie, it's adapted to that 500 kilocalorie deficit, okay? By increasing that, yeah, sure, in the very short term, I'm talking 2 to 4 weeks, we may continue to lose a bit more fat. But then all we're doing is we're actually increasing the damage we're doing and increasing the amount of time. We're just taking ourselves out of action for even longer, because we're then increasing the time it's going to take for us to re-establish a new normal, okay, and going up to maintenance and all those kind of things. So unless you're talking 1 or 2 weeks, if you've got at least a medium-term brain on you and medium-term thinking in that regard, sorry, that notification threw me up. In that regard, go away. What was I saying? In that regard, we want to be going on those diet breaks, and we're actually going to lose fat quicker by doing that, okay? In the medium term, we're going to get to our goals quicker by going on diet breaks, okay? So I hope that helps you, and let me know how you get on, and tell me if you're trying it and what happens. So next question comes from Dave, who says, "Hey Cam, love what you do. Thank you very much. I've been following your posts for a little bit, and you sometimes talk about stoicism, but I've not yet seen the clear link. Help a fella out." Okay, so stoicism. So we'll go down this road. So yes, I do talk about stoicism occasionally. It is imbued kind of throughout my course, and really, stoicism is kind of a tough philosophy to nail down in a sort of quick, snappy sentence, since the majority of it that we have in writing is kind of collection of musings, stories. One of the most famous one is Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, okay, and that's literally a book of his meditations and his thoughts, and that might be part of the issue of why it's hard to establish kind of a clear link between stoicism and fat loss, and I guess in a way it's because it's a bit like the Bible as well. The general, if you're going to sum up a general message of the Bible, quite hard to do in a sentence. It's be good. Maybe you can lay out the 10 Commandments or something like that, but really you'd be watering down an entire religion quite a lot by just limiting it to the 10 Commandments, and that's because it's a bunch of stories and parables, and they're all imbued with deep meaning that we can kind of draw lessons from. And it's the same with Stoicism. When we read the Stoics, what we're really looking at, instead of a direct bullet pointed here's all the things you can learn from Stoicism, it really is just looking at stories, looking at quotes from these people and how they live their lives, and then drawing the meaning from those. But the best way to sum it up is probably, I think the best way is that it's a highly practical philosophy for sort of self-mastery. Okay, so sometimes when we think of philosophy, we like to think of some of the more modern philosophers, is this chair real? Which, does have some applications. Defining reality is has its place in the world, but in terms of us going about our day, living our life, it's not necessarily the most practical. So that's what Stoicism is. More practical. It's more, if grandma dies, how do I deal with it? What are the ways to deal with it? What can I read? What can I do? What actions can I take? All those kind of things. So it's much more practical in that sense. And if you want to know more, actually, The Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday is an incredibly good resource. And also, sort of, if you go on there, what is Stoicism? I'm pretty sure they have a page like that. You can go in and you can read sort of the history of Stoicism and the kind of key players, Seneca and Marcus Aurelius that I've already mentioned. Insofar as it relates to health and fitness, I think because it is about things like self-mastery, courage, and generally how to conduct yourself virtuously, there are obviously many pearls of wisdom that can be extracted and used for fat loss. In fact, I think one of the biggest lessons I've transcribed across have been captured by, to mention him again, Ryan Holiday, in a book called The Obstacle is the Way. Because as the title suggests, it's all about overcoming obstacles, or rather, not so much overcoming them, but turning them into an advantage. And it's an entire book about how we can turn obstacles to our advantage and change our perception of things and our framing, how we frame everything, all that kind of stuff, to see it in a positive light that actually helps us get closer to our goals. Because, to be honest, if we're talking in practical philosophy, then the ultimate practicality is that it gets us closer to our goals, and faster than without a philosophy. So yeah, and there's also things like circles of control come from the Stoics, and that sort of, we have our inner circle, things we can control, and we should pay most attention to those. On our outer circle, of things that we have no control over whatsoever, and those are a lot of those things are things we have to let go. Things like the weather, we can't control the weather. The only thing that we can do in terms of those things, we can't change the outcome. What we can do is change our perception of those things in the outer circle. So and most people are familiar with circles of control, and that comes from the Stoics, and also the idea of training our perception of things and stuff like that. So yeah, I guess really all round, it's a really good guide for approaching fat loss from a mindset perspective, for approaching fat loss as an obstacle that we're trying to overcome and turning it to our advantage, okay? And making ourselves a better person as we do it. All those kind of things, making ourselves a more effective person, making ourselves a person that can achieve goals, all those kind of things. When we're talking about fat loss, we can use these lessons from Stoicism and sort of integrate them. I guess that's still a bit wishy-washy. I mean, really, what I've done, especially when it comes to the 1% course, the 12-week course, what I've done is sort of, I've done a lot of the reading, and I've just applied the lessons just straight in, so that the people who do the course don't necessarily need to go away and read Marcus Aurelius Meditations or whatever. But a lot of credit for my own personal philosophy and from that of the 1% way does have to go to the Stoics. So I guess that's why I mention them a lot, is because they deserve a lot of credit. You know, it's not my original ideas. These come from other people, and they are the Stoics over the years, and they're great works. So yeah, I owe a lot to them. But yeah, like I say, you don't necessarily have to read the Stoics. I think maybe it's worth mentioning as well, you know, sometimes we see, you know, when you say someone has a stoic expression on their face, it's kind of like an emotionless, stern expression would be what you'd expect to see if someone wanted to describe that. And really, that's kind of detracted from what Stoicism actually is, especially in our modern understanding. So I do recommend go away and reading some of the Stoics and making yourselves familiar with some of it. I mentioned him earlier. Ryan Holiday has 4 or 5 books on the Stoics. You know, there's The Obstacle is the Way, Ego is the Enemy, a few of these things that talk about Stoic philosophy and draw lessons out from the Stoics in a more modern context. So those are really good as well. So I recommend Ryan Holiday. But yeah, I mean, I've kind of gone around it in a little bit of a circle, kind of danced around it. Really, there's lots of elements to it, really, and it's threaded through what I do. But thank you for the question. I hope that kind of answers your question and goes some way in providing an answer. And to those of you just listening in and haven't asked the question, yeah, go away, have a look at the Stoics. See if you can make the link between fat loss and that kind of self-mastery and the virtues of Stoicism and how they apply to your own personal journey going forward. So yeah, I hope we all learned something there. Thank you, Dave. Oh, and that's it for today. So don't forget to share this with your friends or in any groups. Make sure you subscribe and hit any notification bells. Or you can head over to the website, www.the1percentway.com, to subscribe there. And you can even book a free game plan session to get started on your fat loss journey if you wanted to. Good luck with your fat loss transformations. I'll catch you next week, same time, same place. Thank you.